Welcome, Alannah.
Hi, thank you.
You know, I'm going to talk about the Fred Hollows Award later on in the interview, but I can't even imagine a more worthy recipient. And I had to reach out to you straight away because your story is, well, it's gut-wrenchingly heartbreaking, but I shouldn't say but, because there's no negating that. At the same time, you've managed to, really find the meaning in it and the purpose in it to help other families. So we'll go through that as we go, but you're truly a blessing to society. And thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
My pleasure. Well, speaking of blessings, let's start. I did say at the very start in the intro here that there is a trigger warning, that we are going to talk about suicide and that. But so hopefully whoever's still with us is still okay with all that. But let's talk about before all this tragedy, happened. And you were blessed with 3 beautiful children, Stuart, Angela, and Stacey. Tell us a bit about them as kids growing up, before any of this ever crossed your mind.
There's definitely a before and after. We've spoken about that many times in our family. Stuart was firstborn, so 3 years later we had Stacey, and then not quite 2 years Angela was born. So Stuart was sporty and fun and popular with his peers, popular with people older as well. He would go down the street with his mates, and some of the mates said to us that, "Oh, don't go downtown with Stu, it takes forever, he stops and talks to everyone." So that was really nice that that guy said that to us. But he was a bit of an innocent. He believed in right always happening. Like, he didn't believe that people would do things badly for no reason. He just was a bit of an innocent in that way. But mostly really popular and sporty and fun to be around and very loving. He used to call his kinder teacher, said that she was as pretty as pink.
Oh.
Yeah. Stace, our middle child, Stace was born with some chromosome deficiencies and always suffered. She has hearing loss. She's quiet. She couldn't play sport. She had trouble with schooling. So different to Stuart and Angela, yet a beautiful, loving, free spirit that would do anything for everyone. Stace was always protected by both Stuart and Angela at school or out and about. She always needed that protection, but since they've died, Stace has tended to, I don't know, she's got their personalities in her and she's just gone ahead leaps and bounds. She's probably done more than we ever expected she would have, which is amazing. And Ange was the baby. She was cute. She was fun. She was so loud. She had lots of friends who will also tell you how loud she was at school. And one of the teachers did a session with the kids after Ange died, and they said, "What is it that you're going to miss most about Ange?" And her jokes, her loudness, her funny things, her loudness. It was just always about how loud she was. But she was also very loyal, especially to Stuart. She had come across different things in her life that was only 16 that should never have happened to a 16-year-old, or 13, 14, 15 and 16 when all this started for us. So it did change her, but Ange was the type of kid that I always thought she would be all right. It was Stacey that I worried about. So turns out that I worried about the wrong one.
You just don't know, though, do you? Like, it's and teenagers in particular keep so much to themselves, and they'll always tell you everything's okay, and it's
and I think her personality was the type that she brushed everything off, and she did seem to cope really well with everything. So when all of that happened to Stuart, she was seeming to cope. But I guess underneath it was too much.
Yeah. So Stuart became, interested in being a chef, and, really thought that was going to be a fantastic career. How did that come about? What suddenly triggered him to become a chef or want to become a chef?
Well, my mum and dad had a coffee shop in Hay in New South Wales. It was a really small town. Everybody had come into the coffee shop, and on school holidays we would go there, or one or two of the kids would stay with mum and dad, and he'd go into the shop and he'd help them and he'd serve people, and he really loved it. And then in year 10 they had a school camp to the Gold Coast, and he was talking to the driver, who was also the cleaner, who was also the cook, and he sort of talked about it when he got home and said, that sounds like a great idea. I think I'll be a cook and drive buses around Australia.
Fantastic. And then he went to become a chef, through an apprenticeship or something like that.
Yeah, he started off doing a school traineeship. So he did 2 days at school and 3 days at a workplace, and really loved it. And then he applied for a job, and another girl got the job, but then in the meantime somebody else left, so he was the next one, and they rang him and said, you can also start if you like. So he was 17 and 3 months exactly the day that he started.
Wow.
17 and 9 months, so he had a 3-month trial.
And at 17 and 9 months, or even just 17, 18, all that age, your life's only starting. You're just starting to get a grip of who you really are and what's important. But sadly, that
it's so different to school, where everything is handed to you and there's rules and regulations that everybody follows, whereas work, it was you're on your own.
And it shouldn't be like that. This is why they have workplace health and safety and everything else. But unless somebody's speaking up, and in Stuart's case, sadly, that his enthusiasm for that, for being a chef and for that wonderful new life that he had envisaged, was, I'll say stolen from him, because that's how I feel it to be. And through a series of horrible workplace bullying events. And I don't want to dredge up trauma for you every
No, that's
time.
okay. It was you've got to remember it was 21 years ago, and workplace bullying wasn't a thing at that time. It was normal, that, not nice, but normal, that the youngest and the newest copped it. So when Stuart came home and told us that things had been happening and he wasn't happy at work, he didn't really specify what was going on, but both my husband and I, and we both still feel so guilty about it, said, oh, you're an apprentice, you have to put up with a little bit of the stuff that goes on. And I truly believe that he took that on as he wasn't strong enough, and he never really mentioned it to us again until he'd actually left the workplace, and it all came out. And then he said, but I tried to tell you. And of course, that's one of the things that we just felt so guilty about.
And I can't even imagine how that would feel as a parent, but you can't blame yourself. But it's no point me saying that, because
and we have worked through it. But
yeah, it's and so he the bullying was like, like some of the things I've read, making it at 5 minutes to go, and they would make him count a 20-kilo bag of peas or something. How many peas are in there? And
it was sort of aimed in a joking way, but if he didn't do it, it became serious. There was some awful things. He bent over something and the guy came up behind him and did some pretty awful sexual type things. There was a lot of humiliation and jokes at his expense. Just little things that just chipped and chipped and chipped away at him until he believed that he was a wuss, or a pussy, as he was being called many times. He believed that he wasn't strong enough to take it. Other people had gone through this, why couldn't I?
This is one of the things I, hear a lot about bullying, is that the person who's being bullied doesn't speak up and tell people because they feel weak, because they feel ashamed and this horrible sense of, I failed and I'm not good enough, and that, and in actual fact, that's nowhere near the truth. The truth is that the bully is an absolute bastard, bastard or a bitch, whatever, just an absolute mongrel. And the poor person who's on the receiving end of it constantly is traumatized by this, not only by the person, but by their own beliefs about themselves.
And that underlying thing that we had said, oh, you have to put up with it.
Yeah.
Had we known how bad it was, we would never have said that. But he never really spoke about what was happening. He just said, I don't like it that much, they pick on me.
Yeah. And if it was sort of semi-normal back then, I guess you just do it. And I mean, I just, every time I think about your story, my heart breaks. I don't know how a parent can go through this, but you have, and it's and Stuart and Angela are very close. Like, despite the fact that there was a bigger gap between them than the others, and Angela had quite a tough time coping with all of the treatment. Stuart was.
She didn't seem to. In hindsight, yes, she did. But like I said earlier, Ange just let things brush off her like a duck. But there was an incident at her secondary school where a teacher was blamed for doing something that Angela witnessed, and it wasn't what actually happened. And she stood up, and there was quite a few students who really bagged her about it, taking the teacher's side instead of the students. And she said that if somebody had stood up for my brother, he wouldn't be suffering now. So she was really strong in that way. But she was only 13 when Stu first became what we call unwell. And 13's an awful age to have so much change in her life. And I remember one night we were sitting at the table at dinner, and Stuart had had his licence at this stage, so Andrew was probably about 15, and we heard his car coming, and we thought, we never knew what mood he would be in or what was going to happen next. And she said, uh-oh, here comes George. And we looked at her and said, no, that's Stu. And she said, no, that's not Stu. That Stu left when all this shit happened. That's George. Yeah, so
So how did his behaviour change over time, that to go from a really happy boy that talked to everybody to how did he end up? Like, how did it affect his state of being?
So he used to get up and ride his bike to work. He was always half an hour early. He'd come home and he'd cook whatever he'd learnt that day for us for dinner, or he'd say, can you buy chocolate because I want to write our names in chocolate on the cheesecake or whatever. And within about 2 months, he started to not want to get there so early or sleep in. And I just thought, that's 5 a.m. getting up in the morning, it's winter. That makes sense. He's not used to the early mornings, so I brushed it off. And then he'd start taking a sickie. And again, it was, well, he's now 18. He's been out drinking for the night. He's tired. I didn't put it together with something was going on at work. And then he went on work cover and he just changed. He got onto marijuana, which was really bad for him. He would lie in his bedroom in a fetal position, crying. He still went to soccer, but he didn't interact with his mates. He probably isolated himself. I remember one day something had come out through the investigation that he felt ashamed of, even though it wasn't his fault. And he walked around, he had a paper bag over his head with the eyes cut out because he didn't want us to see him. He said, how can you look at me knowing that had happened?
Oh, God. God, that's just bloody devastating.
Yes, but he changed from Stuart to George, as Angela said. There was such a huge before and after.
Was there mental health support back then, or any counsellors that could have?
He had EPA, I think it's called, where he had 2 sessions and then was told, well, you've had your 2 free sessions, now you have to pay for yourself or go elsewhere. He was a apprentice, so he got some free counselling at TAFE, but then he was no longer working, so they said you have to go elsewhere. He went to community free counselling because when he was on work care, he was only getting 75% of an apprentice wage. That's not much, and couldn't afford private counselling. And again, he was sent elsewhere because he didn't fit our criteria. Perhaps it was the marijuana and whatever. Then he went to YSAS, and the guy who saw him at YSAS left. But like, this guy is way up here on my level of, he continued to see Stuart right until the week before he died in his own time without pay.
Wow. Wow.
But he was pushed from pillar to post. There was work cover investigation, so psychiatrists who, like, I don't think they were really there to help him. I felt like they were there to see whether he's going to go on work cover. So it was more about, you know, there's other reasons, not work, that contribute to do your state of mind. And there were other reasons. He became involved with a girl that wasn't the best choice. And they weren't good for each other. It wasn't just her, they were bad for each other. And I guess the marijuana was part of that.
And he also had a daughter in that time as well.
Yeah. I remember the day he told me they were pregnant, and I thought, oh, goodness, that's good news. But boy, neither of them were ready to be parents.
Yeah. And was the baby born before you lost Stuart?
Yeah, she was 4 months old when Stu died, and we thought that perhaps that would be enough to keep him here. There was probably about a year between when he finished work and went on work cover. There was an investigation. He met the girlfriend, the pregnancy. There was about a year where we sort of thought things could improve. He got himself into hospital. He's got some more work elsewhere. But underlying, there was still the work cover investigation happening. There was this relationship that wasn't doing them any good, which we didn't realise at the time that it wasn't that good. And then there was the work cover investigation finished, and it all sort of bombed again.
God, there's just so much underlying stuff with everybody. Like, we all put on this brave face, and you know, everybody says, oh yeah, I'm fine, because we don't want to be the person who brings anyone down, and we don't want to be the person who seems weak. And, you know, if only, and the stigma around appearing weak or being a victim, you know, or crying poor is still pretty bad, and you're working on that. And I'm going to get to that soon. But, you know, in the meantime, this really did impact Angela. You know, you thought she was going really well, and you know, you've talked about Stu losing his life, but prior to Stu, you lost Angela.
Yeah, we had received a phone call from work cover in late July saying that they had finished their investigation and they would let us know within a month whether or not it would go to court. We know now that Angela and Stuart had discussed things that had happened to him in the workplace that he hadn't discussed with us, and we found out a lot of more information afterwards when we read statements and such. And Ange had already been through sticking up for Stuart at school, at sport, sort of doing that thing with this teacher and being really strong. Bendigo's a small town. When you have an incident like this, I guess she probably thought that this is all going to come out and be on the local Bendigo paper. And Ange took her life a week after that phone call. There was some incidents happening at school with girlfriends and such, but underlying, we believe that it was the work cover, the thought that maybe Stuart's going to go downhill again when all this comes out. We believe that that was probably the catalyst for her taking her life.
That's that's so extreme. You know, to feel so feel so much pressure within you. You know, and to feel so much empathy, I guess, for somebody else, that you would go so far as to do that. You must have been absolutely bloody shocked just
We expected Stuart might take his life. There were several times he'd attempted, and we had talked about it, that, you know, we hope that he gets through this, and if he gets through this, he'll be a stronger person. But
yeah.
like I've said, I just didn't see it with Anne. She was so out there and in your face and loud and always laughing and carrying on. But that underlying gentleness and kindness that she didn't show was eating away at her. And there was an incident that happened at school that day between a couple of girls that probably pushed her, but it wasn't their fault, and it was probably something that she would have gotten over. It was that underlying fear of what might happen with Stuart, I think.
Yeah. People are going to be listening to this and think, you know, how does a mother cope, you know, losing a daughter, and, you know, as well as having the other, you know, the pressure that's going on in the background. But you lost Stuart only 1 month later, only 1 month.
That month in between, it was so hard because we were grieving Angela, but at the same time we were terrified of losing Stuart. And every time I thought, I must be careful, I've got to go and check on Stuart, I felt guilty because I wasn't thinking about Ange. And then there was Stacey in the middle that we were trying to keep safe.
I can't even imagine it. Like, and I feel like a lot of people listening to this wouldn't even know, wouldn't even be able to fathom what you went through. And
I don't know how we did go through it, to be honest, one day at a time.
Either do I know how you went through it. Like, you know, I like, how did you keep going? Like, I mean, I said one day at a time, but like to lose 2 children in 1 month, plus all that underlying pressure. I don't, you know, a lot of people may have even taken their own life, or may have just gone into a complete state of, I can't do life anymore, or I don't know. What was it, Stacey? Or what kept you upright?
It was Stacey, it was Taya, it was my nursing background. I knew that I had to keep myself strong and safe and healthy, because I did have to look after Taya and Stace. So there was something always going on. Like, the grief was there without a doubt, and it was full on, in my face grief. But there was also that need to be there for the baby, need to be there to make sure Stacey was all right.
Does she ever ask about her dad, and, you know, or used to?
No, right from the baby, we were very, very careful to talk about Stu and Ange, and I contacted the Doogie Institute. It's an American thing, works with suicide victims and such, and explained how old she was and that we wanted to know what to do with her. So they said to be honest, in age appropriate. So because she came to us more often than she was with her mum when she was those ages, I used to say to her that, see that photo of your dad? Look at him smiling. He's holding you. Look how much he loved you. And then as she got a bit older, your dad died. And she didn't know what that was, but she accepted the words. And a little bit older, she would ask, how did my dad die? And I told her that your dad died because the part of his brain that thinks was sick. And she accepted that, until eventually she got the whole story. And by that stage, she'd accepted that Dad had died and that it had been suicide and that he loved her.
Wow, that's everything you're saying. Like, every little part of this is breaking my bloody heart. I'm trying not to cry, but I'm such a bloody sook baby. But it's wow, you know, what a tough set of circumstances. Everything, you know, it's not just the one thing. Like, there's just so many tough things that you've managed to go through. Did you through any of this have some kind of sense of I need to be strong through this, because I want to bring those injustices, you know?
Yes, definitely. To begin with, I did what I called my own, I can't remember the words now. There was something going around at the time about justice and people who'd been victims of crime would go to the criminal and they'd have a chat and stuff.
Yeah.
Restorative justice, that was the word.
Yeah.
And I'd heard about it, and I'd done some volunteer work with a group that was working with that. And my restorative justice was that I went to every single person that I had been to previously asking for help and said, you know, why did you not do what you said you would do, or why did this happen, or why did that happen? And most of them, I felt satisfied with their answers. There was one that I didn't, but I've learned to let that one go. But I think in the end, I was trying to find out what went wrong so that I could fix it. And then I realised that I'd never be able to fix it. So I was able to let it go.
Well, I think you're an incredibly strong woman, and you might not feel that, or you might just think, well, I'm just a mum doing my best. But I think that I think there's a lot of strength and a lot of courage in what you've done. The other thing is that was back in the early 2000s, and back then suicide, well, you said, like the workplace thing, it just was normal, and suicide was seen as weakness, and that type of stuff. How did you there's a lot of stigma and shame around that sort of stuff. How did the community I guess respond to you as a mother, losing two children, being in a town like Bendigo, which was not as big then, not as
Twofold. I was really blessed with a lot of really good friends who were very, very supportive. But there was also the gossip, what sort of family are they? My next door neighbour was asked, you live next door to them, what sort of family are they? And he said, they're just normal, like you and me.
Wow.
But there was a lot of gossip about, people had heard that there was some physical, verbal, sexual abuse, so put 2 and 2 together and came up with 10, and that was pretty awful. But overall, I believe that we were very, very lucky to have such supportive people.
Oh God, I read somewhere in one of your articles that people would cross over to the other side of the road and to avoid you, and maybe I think that happens a lot, that people just don't know what to say. They just
But to balance that, one day I was walking, because that was my thing. I used to go for a walk every morning. When Stuart was alive, I'd walk to get home to make sure he was okay. And after he died, it was, I have to get out of this house. I just had to get out. And often I would see people and they'd either put their head down and keep walking or whatever. People I knew. This particular morning, I saw this woman coming, and her kids had gone to the same primary school. They were a few years younger, but I knew her by name, and that's about all. And mentally I was walking towards her thinking, here we go, what's she going to do? Is she going to walk across the road, or is she going to put her head down? She stopped. She looked me straight in the eye. She put her hand on my shoulder and gently rubbed. Didn't say anything, and then stood there for a few seconds and then kept walking. And I think, you don't have to say anything. It's the fact that you make the effort to try.
Yeah. I think that's a really, really important thing, because most people don't know what to say, and just the acknowledgement that I feel is probably.
And that one incident is the one that sticks in my mind, not the ones who turned away or pretended not to see.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, I was thinking about this prior to us, getting on Zoom today, and if you would do something different as a parent. But I think, you already covered that, saying, that I wish I had have, not said those words about you're just an apprentice, or is there anything else you wish?
Definitely that. I've always believed that with Stuart, we did absolutely everything we could to try and save him. There's things that I'd have done differently if I'd known things differently.
Yeah.
But with what we knew at the time, 100% sure that there's nothing more we could have done. Angela, different story. If I'd been more aware that she was suffering, if I'd been more observant of how this was affecting her rather than just being so focused on him. There was a lot of guilt around Angela's death that took a lot of counselling and a lot of self-forgiveness.
And you can say that, if only we had have encouraged her to speak up or something, but half the time they're not going to speak up. And it's, that.
And I think too, Stuart's mental illness was so textbook. It was absolute change from the normal Stu. There was some violence with his marijuana use. There was the lying in bed in the fetal position and crying, all of the things that you would expect from a mental unwellness. And she continued on the way she was. Perhaps she saw herself as she was okay. And it was just this one day that she reacted before thinking.
And it could have been so different.
Yeah.
So different, yeah. I'm going to ask one more question on this, and then we're going to move on, because you've done some amazing stuff out of this grief, and that takes a lot of strength and a lot of courage. But I'm thinking that a lot of people listening to this would be feeling like me, in one sense, completely heartbroken and deeply touched. That's just kind of like unimaginable. But the other part, like for me, and I know other people will feel this, is this extreme fury and anger at such senseless behavior towards innocent people. And I for one, I cannot stand bullying, and I don't even understand where that shit comes from. I don't even understand why you would think.
He was a psychopath, really. A work cover found somebody who worked 20 years ago with the same guy, and the same things was happening then. So I've decided that he's taken far too much from us, and he's not having any more of my headspace. So, yeah.
So, well, I think I reckon people would want to know what became of that investigation. Did he pay his dues?
No, because the Department of Education and Training refused to allow apprentices or trainees in that workplace while he was still there. He was actually given a payout while Stuart was still alive, and Stuart saw that as they paid him to do this to me. So it was another nail in the coffin, really. It was, he never paid because Stuart wasn't alive to go to court. Then the court case didn't happen. No. Yeah. We had 2 phone calls in the week after Stuart's funeral from people who'd worked with him, both saying, "Oh, look, I'm really sorry. We were told that we weren't allowed to speak up. We had to sign a confidentiality agreement. I'm sorry, can I go back to work cover and tell them what really happened?" And I went, "Well, that's not going to bring him back. Not going to bring Ange back." So yeah, I've just put them out of my mind. They're not worth any of my headspace.
Well, I think that's grossly unfair and bloody disgusting, actually. And I really hope that with these new bully laws and workplace health and safety laws that they have now, I dearly hope that things have dealt with better now. And I'm not going to be so naive as to think that they are, but I really hope that things are better now. But it does not bring someone back. But yeah, I'm on the edge of my seat, like nearly. I'm trying to hold back tears so much, and then the anger of that just. I'm speechless, but I'm going to move on, because otherwise we'll just get stuck in that rut of wanting to just.
Even that, there was some positive that came out of that. I literally bumped into Lindsay Fox around a pole.
Yeah.
And my husband worked for Armaguard, and we were at a function, and he said, "Oh, do you work for me, or are you the little woman who's come down with your husband," sort of thing. And I'd been at a suicide bereavement weekend and left early to go to this function. And I said to him, "Well, actually, no." He said, "Oh, so you're enjoying the weekend, been out shopping?" And I said, "No, actually, I've been to and I was pretty pissed off." And he grabbed me by the arm and took me over to the other side of the room and said that his son had died. "Is there anything at all that you believe caused the suicides?" And I told him about workplace bullying, and he said, "What can I do? Whatever you want, what can I do?" And he organised and paid for a DVD that I made with Lynn Fox, and that went out to over 300 companies Australia-wide, and it was a anti-bullying educational DVD. So even that, there has been
Wow.
a positive come from that.
Yeah, yeah. And the right person at the right time. So
Yeah.
you that DVD that you made, like this, and this is the beginning of your journey to say, well, you know, I have gone through this grief, and I don't want anybody else to go through it, you know, and what can I bring what can I do with my courage and strength, you know, to help other people? So that 300 DVDs, where did that sort of go out to, and sort of?
It started off, it was an educational thing just for Lynn Fox in their own workplaces.
Yeah.
And then other places heard about it and asked for copies. So they made copies and they just sent them out to anybody who asked for it. So
With the aim to reduce.
it was, yeah, to be used in workplaces as an educational tool.
Yeah. And then after that, which I think that's fantastic in itself, and had you just stopped there, that still would have been enough, but you didn't stop there. Like you ended up doing, I don't want to miss it, so I'm going to read it, but you ended up doing, creating a campaign to promote suicide prevention strategies, and worked with some other companies or other organisations to develop that. So what was that about?
So that was SPAN. In 2011, a woman who was my counsellor to begin with, and then I volunteered for her workplace, she and I were invited to Geelong to talk about workplace bullying, which we did. And we met two women who had started SPAN in Geelong. They had both lost their sons around Australia Day weekend, a year apart, and they'd started SPAN Walk in Geelong, and they invited us to come along the following year, which we did. And Bet and I talked about it, and we just said, we've got to get this in Bendigo. So we went to Rod Case, who was the editor at the Bendigo Advertiser at the time, and he was just so quick to come on board. We got a committee going, and we started our first SPAN Walk in 2012. And the Addy was absolutely amazing. For that era, 2012, the day of the walk, the front page of the Bendigo Advertiser, which was the really big paper like the Age size, had the word suicide in bright red, made up of butterflies and the amount of butterflies of the suicide toll that year.
Oh,
so
wow.
I can't remember, I think it was 1,700 odd butterflies in the word, and it was front page on the day.
1,700 in what area? Like in Victoria?
I think it was in Australia.
1,700. Oh, that's just 1,700 too many.
A lot more than that now.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So what is so there's two things you've talked about there that we'll want pull apart. SPAN. What does SPAN stand for?
Suicide Prevention Awareness Network.
Okay. And the walk is that an annual walk now that you?
We've had 9. We had to cancel both 2020 and 2021, but
yeah.
I saw in the Bendigo paper on the weekend that the Easter Fair is going ahead, so I figure if they can, we can.
Yeah, good.
Next year, yeah.
And so what happens? Does people just come and walk to raise awareness for suicide, or?
Yeah, it's really important to stop the traffic. So we start at Dai Gum San, which is the Chinese precinct in Bendigo. We walk through the botanical gardens there at Roslyn Park. We go to the fountain, which is the middle of the city of Bendigo, walk along the main street there. The police stop all the traffic while 300 to 500 people cross the road. And it's really important there because people in their cars go, what's going on? And they look and they see the T-shirts with SPAN on it, and it's that awareness. But it's very important for the families who've lost someone to suicide. They find that the walk and the butterfly ceremony that we have at the end of it is just so comforting for them. It's a place where they can feel they're not alone, that other people understand what they've been through. And we're working towards not just people who've been bereaved, but other people coming along to learn about how suicide affects our community.
Has it expanded a lot from just the bereaved families to a lot more community people being involved?
Yeah, slowly. It's it's had a lot of media attention, and we've been very lucky in Bendigo that we have had that attention. And I think, I'm not quite sure of the statistics, but at least 110 people are affected by a suicide. So if you have maybe 100 suicides in Bendigo, that's quite a lot of people that have been affected. So if you look at from that perspective, everybody knows somebody who's either had a family member, a school friend, a workplace friend, a neighbour. Yeah.
Even my cousin who lives in Bendigo was, she remembers you losing your two kids, and, even not knowing you, she still talks about it now as having a big impact. I remember that, and I remember back then. And I think that even if you're not connected in that 110, I think people still hear it and they're kind of like, well, that's in my town, that's someone I know. I went to school, that's my school. Do you know what I think that it probably expands way further than that 110, and you stop and reflect and think, oh wow, wow. And I think it hits you in the face way too hard.
Yeah. And then all of those people know somebody else who may have known somebody else. And and our kids, I've had so many people have come up to me at the Span Walk and they knew our kids through sport or through friends of friends or something like that. And I absolutely love it when somebody will come up and tell me, oh, I remember your kids, or tell me a funny story about something they did, or Angela wearing yellow shorts to school and not getting in trouble when everybody else would get in trouble for wearing the wrong colour ponytail cover. That's my girl.
Well, it's keeping their memories alive, isn't it? It's
definitely.
Sort of it's leaving a legacy, and it's sort of saying, they may be gone physically, but we still remember them and they're still part of our lives and they're still part of this community. And I think that's special.
That was really difficult for us in the early years. All we could remember was the pain and the loss and the bullying and the system and the disappointments and the letdowns. Whereas maybe I'd say towards 6 years, I smiled at a memory and it was like, oh my goodness, why am I laughing about these kids? They're not here. What's so funny about that? And that was the beginning of, I can remember really fun things now, and I love it.
Yeah. It takes a lot to get to that, though. I think that we've just got to also accept that there is a process for grief. And people say, just forget it. I know, just don't worry about it. You'll be okay. I think that we have to allow each other to move through that process.
You have to go through it. You can't not. You can avoid it for as long as you like, but eventually you have to go through it.
Yeah. And I've heard a great expression about it. It's like waves, and at first, because I lost my sister, I've been to cancer, and at first it's like, the waves are really sharp and fast and hard, and they just keep coming and they keep smacking you in the head, every hour, every half hour. It just doesn't go. And then over time, those waves sort of become smoother, and they become more time between each time they come up, but they still come up, and they're going to come up.
Sometimes the tsunami will still come and get you.
And it's it never goes away, but I think it just becomes a little bit more manageable, and
you learn how to live with it.
Yeah,
you learn to accept the unacceptable.
Yep, and I think that's it. It's not really getting over it. It's accepting that it is what it is. You also developed or helped develop Safetalk. What's that about?
Span the year that we didn't do the walk, we applied through a Victorian government funding scheme that was called Pick My Project, and we were lucky enough, it was voted by the communities. We were lucky enough to be one of the groups that were voted in, and we got $100,000 from the state government, and with that we used it to do Safetalk education. We wanted it to be in workplaces, and we also wanted it to be available to public, like for instance a hairdresser who couldn't afford to give their staff time off to go to a 4-hour session, then they could, we had them at at the TAFE, and we had a couple at different places where public could come in their own time.
Yeah.
I think we had 32 sessions. One of them was cut short because of COVID and we couldn't do it. They were very well received in some of the businesses, and the public ones we had people come from. There was a hairdresser one day, there was a couple of school teachers came in a mixed group and families. There was a mum who just came because she was interested. She had teenage children and she wanted to learn as much as she could.
What sort of feedback are you getting from people when you're doing those talks?
Really positive feedback from the ones who had attended. It was hard work getting them advertised enough that people knew that they were okay to come along. It wasn't like the ones that we had at places like Hazeldene's Chickens. That was easy because Hazeldene's organised for their staff to attend. And St John of God the same, but the ones that were public, people probably didn't realise that anybody could go, so the numbers were down a bit for them, but overall the whole lot of the sessions, we believe that there was quite a good uptake of positions.
Were you sharing strategies to help prevent, or at least potentially prevent, suicide?
So Safetalk is a strategy in itself. It's a 4-hour session where people learn how to ask if somebody needs help.
Okay, yeah.
How to recognise it and then how to ask, and you do some practice towards the end of it of how you would come up to someone and notice that you seem a bit down. Is there anything I can do? Are you thinking of harming yourself? And it was really important to get that message out there that it's okay to ask, are you thinking of suicide? Because people are often afraid of that, and they're frightened that if they mention the word suicide, that'll put something in their head. But that's not the case. People are thinking about it. They want someone to bring it up. They want someone to recognise that they need that help.
So that you've probably saved multiple lives, and I guess you'll never know that. You'll never know, but I'm sure, even if you save, the whole thing is, even if you save one, then that's a massive success.
I've been lucky enough to, I did a speech once at a 3AW schools forum in Melbourne, and Jim Steins actually brought a young man up at the end of it to introduce him to me, a young boy who'd struggled and who had contemplated suicide, and he said, this boy wants to talk to you. And
wow.
The kid said, I wanted to kill myself, but I can't do that to my mum and dad after listening to you.
Oh,
yeah, that was like, wow, that was probably my first public, like I had spoken out, but that was the first time I'd done it in such a public way. So, yep, this is why I'm doing this. This is good.
Well, that touched me more than anything. Oh my God. Yeah. So that's, they're clearly working, clearly doing their job.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And so you also mentor funeral directors, and
that came about too. That was really interesting. I'd been asked by Suicide Prevention Australia, and I did some training on public speaking, and the funeral directors have a yearly meeting of all their groups together, and I went and spoke at that. And from that, Tobin Brothers have asked me several times to do some work with them and mentor the funeral directors about what I would have liked done differently or what I thought was important. And that was really good for me to be able to say, well, way back in 2002, nobody would have thought that a mum could carry a coffin out, but it was something I really felt that I wanted to do because I brought them into the world. I wanted to carry them out, but I didn't ever mention that. I never said it, so I didn't do it. So I was able to say to the funeral directors, offer women that choice, and they do that now, which is really great.
Wow. Oh God, you've made I don't know if you can see it. I think I see you as extremely humble and extremely just doing your thing for your kids. Yeah. But I don't know if you can actually see, from where I'm sitting, I just see impact after impact after impact, you know, that you just you know, creating this impact in all these different areas and touching so many people's lives that I truly believe you're saving people's lives just from the work you do. And I think that's spectacular. I really do.
I believe in an afterlife, and I believe that we might come back and do things differently, learn things differently. And early on, I thought to myself, I'm not coming back and doing this shit again. I'm going to try and do the best I can that I learn from it now.
Yeah. I always say the same thing. You know, people believe different things, and I think you've got to come back and redo what you didn't do well. Right. So I always tell people, God, you got one crack at it. Do it bloody well.
Yeah, I don't want to do this again. So I will try and do the best I can with what I've got now.
Well, you're doing bloody fantastically. It's you know, one thing before I want to ask about Fred Hollows. Well, but before we do that, how do you take care of yourself? Because you're bringing up this emotional dredging every time you talk about it. How do you look after you?
When I speak with other families about their loss, again, Bet Phillips, the woman who started SPAN with me, taught me very, very early that this is not your pain. Don't take on other people's pain as yours. And I've become very good at that. I can share my grief and share my story with them, but not take on their pain. I don't do a whole lot of anything. I read, I watch movies. I don't do anything specific to look after myself, but I am aware that I need to keep myself healthy. And if it does get too much, I'll say no now, whereas I never used to say no.
Oh, good. Which is a big fault of women, isn't it? You know, we just keep saying yes, 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 yes. Yeah.
And a lot of the stress of my life is not stressful anymore, so things have improved in that way.
Yeah. No, I think it's wonderful. They always say that if you want to feel better about yourself, give to others. You know, so, but now you don't do any of this. We're getting to this big bit, but it's probably not. It's nothing to you compared to everything that you've been through. However, you don't do any of this work for recognition. You do it because you just want, in the hope that other people don't have to go through the same suffering, and you know that. But you were recognised by the Fred Hollows Foundation, or you were nominated, as was I, and you know, for the Fred Hollows Award, the Fred Awards, the inaugural ones for the humanitarian of the year. Rightly so, and I couldn't think of a more deserving person. You won the award. You took out the humanitarian of the year, and firstly, congratulations. That's the first thing I want to say. But secondly, you absolutely deserve it for the incredible work you do, and I'm just so happy that you got it and that you're doing that kind of work. Did you ever imagine something like this happening to you? Because you're not doing it for that reason.
No, definitely not. There's twice I was paid $1,000 for speaking at a funeral directors conference, and both times I donated that money to SPAN because I never wanted to feel like I was profiting from the kid's death. Yeah. It's always been about underlying, this is because I wouldn't be doing this. I'd probably be living a life oblivious to other people's pain. Yeah. Yeah. In a way, but yeah.
Well, you are living this, and you are doing great things, and you are saving lives, and you know, and you've been recognised for it. So, what does it mean to you to have that award, to receive that?
Fred Hollows' name is held up with such high esteem, and I'm so proud to be part of that process of being nominated. And I think every single person that was nominated deserves and is a winner. When I'd heard that I had won it, I was just amazed that I read some of the things that other people had done and thought, I didn't think that I'd done that much more than everybody else. But the dog's really crying now.
I know, the dog's cheering for you. I think we got the dog quiet there for a while, and now he's like, celebrating your success. But
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, because I, also read a lot of the things that everyone had done. And, for me, how I felt about it is that I was just so proud or so pleased that there were so many people doing so many great things for other people. And I just think that, when you see that, your heart's filled with joy. It's not about competition, or not about, me, pick me. It's how damn grateful this, how I felt, and I'm sure you felt the same, is how grateful you feel that there are so many people trying so hard, just to make the world a better place. And
and we used we used the nomination as another way to get that word out there, that you can get help if you need it. And
yeah.
the media again got behind it, and they were great. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, hopefully now it brings you a lot more awareness. Hopefully this, you can, and I don't mean it in the wrong way, but you've got this for the year. Hopefully for that year you can ride it, and I don't mean in a using way, but ride on that wave, so that you can get to more people to talk about suicide prevention, because it's such a topic that is still stigmatized, and still there's shame attached to it, and it needs to change. And the more you can get it out there, the better.
That's for sure. And very proud, very humbled, very honoured, happy of course to have been chosen, but underlying it's that don't ever forget why you do this. You do it because your kids aren't here.
Yeah. Which no award can ever. Oh my God. Well, anyway, I think you're incredibly deserving and incredibly strong. I've said it 3 or 4 times, incredibly courageous. And, you kind of say, well, no, I'm just doing what I have to do. But it does take strength. It really does take strength to bounce back up.
It has done. And I really appreciate the fact that my family, Stacey especially, really struggled with me being so public and out there and in your face and talking about it in a town that people knew. But she never once asked me to not do it. She just, no, you've got to do it, Mum, but just don't ask me to stand up there with you. Which is
I think you're doing amazing. Well, I tell you what, I've loved this interview, and it's not loved in a way that's wow, look at all this, but it's a meaningful conversation that needs to happen. People need to hear this stuff, and they need to know that people are out there doing things for other families, and just trying to raise awareness and trying to prevent this from anyone else from going through the same pain. But this podcast is Get Off the Bench, and it's to inspire people to take action. You have done that. You've used the grief to springboard you into, making the world a better place. But staying with the theme of suicide, which is just the worst topic, but suicide prevention and awareness, what advice do you have for parents to get off the bench in relation to keeping their child safe from harm? Now, I know that's not totally possible, but if they in an ideal world,
I guess underlying for me is that I believe that nobody thinks their own child would take their life. That absolute cannot believe that your child would do that. I think if you're feeling that your child might be suicidal or suffering in any way that could cause them self-harming, you have to get past that feeling, and you have to bring it out there to them in the open and say it. Are you going to hurt yourself? Are you thinking of suicide? As hard as it is to hear the answer, it's certainly better than what could happen if you don't ask the question.
Yep, 100%. Wow. All right. Well, now, where can people find you? How can they follow SPAN and support you, and keep up with your work, and help if they can?
So, SPAN is spancv.org.au. That's our website address. On Facebook, I'm not quite sure the address, but it's SPAN Central Victoria.
Yeah. I'll put the links in the show notes so people
yeah,
can link to that. And yeah, well, that'd be fantastic. Well, I hope people do, you know, at least follow you on Facebook so that they're seeing what you're doing and they're, you know, getting some ideas and they feel like they're part of the prevention wave, you know, at least, because I think that the more people on board with that, you know, the more chance we've got.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably be holding a walk again next March.
In Bendigo. So if you can anybody join? You don't have to be Bendigo.
Definitely. We had a lady come from Sydney one year.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. Well, hopefully more people, people go up there and do that. And that'd be really, yeah.
Next meeting we have, we'll probably have lots of discussions about when it will be and how we will do it to be COVID safe. But yeah.
Well, keep us updated, and then I can also promote that as well at the same time. So that's wonderful. Well, Alannah, thank you so much for joining me. It's always a hard topic, but I think it's a necessary one to go through. And I just think you're absolutely incredible. And I'm so glad you've won that award so that I got to meet you and, you know, so that I could have the opportunity to bring this horrible, but it's such an important topic to the table. So yeah, so thank you so much. Keep us updated, and I'll keep everybody updated from this end. And I can't wait to actually meet you in person one day.
Thank you.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you.
All right, bye.
See ya.